And now they're building phones that will make it impossible. So how do you make this trade-off?
I want privacy. I don't want people reading my email. But if you say, look, it's a binary choice. They're either going to read your email or you're going to get killed by a terrorist. I know which side of that I'm coming on. I don't know what you guys write, but I don't write anything. Number one, anything you write down is going to be in the public domain someday anyways. But to me, it's very clear. We have something called the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment lets the government, with the permission of a separate branch of government, namely, if the judiciary agrees with the executive branch is where they have the intelligence and prosecution stuff, the judiciary, separate branch, if the judge says okay, then they can look in your safe deposit vault, they can read your mail, they can tap your phone. If you get arrested for DWI and refuse to take a breathalyzer test, they can invade your body. I mean, all of these things have been well litigated. The courts say it's constitutional under the Fourth Amendment. And for an industry to say, well, you know, they can look at your mail, but they can't look at your email. Why? Because, well, our competitors from overseas will give you this phone that you can't look at their email, so for competitive reasons, we have to. Don't tell me about the competitive stuff. I'm worried about if you're, just think about this. Your kid gets kidnapped, and the kidnapper leaves a note, I'm going to kill the kid in 2 hours, and they drop the phone on the way out. I would like to go to that phone and find out who, and maybe get me a chance to find out and free my kid. And if I couldn't get into that phone, I think the nice ways to phrase it, I wouldn't be happy. And I think all of this focus on encryption, and when they say technologically it would be done, it's just not true. You can pass a law that says Apple and Samsung, whoever sells phones in the United States, cannot have a phone that lets software encryption run on it. And that's just a piece of software. You can keep it from doing that. You can look at everything going in and out. If it's encryption, you turn it off. And I think that's the kind of thing that we should have available in case you need to find out what goes on. And I've always been fascinated. We don't mind if these search companies and social media companies study everything about our likes and dislikes. They know what your infirmities are because they know what drugs you buy. They know whether you're putting on or off weight based on the size of the clothing you're buying, and whether you're an alcoholic or not, or a druggie, or a sex maniac, or whatever it is. They know a lot about you. And not only they know about it, they sell it to others for their own personal gain. And then they say, oh, but we don't want anybody to know about you personally. We have to protect your privacy. What, are you kidding me? You sold your privacy to somebody.
Additional questions?
One.
Okay.
No, number one. I think I got your one.
Okay. So we'll try to wrap this up, but I'll ask both of you commands. You're in the home of Coca-Cola.
Yep.
One of your big projects has been soda taxes in New York City, in Oakland, Philadelphia, Mexico City. Now, I'll say that I've been chairman for several years of the Coca-Cola International Advisory Board, and they really have heard, and they're making a real effort to reduce sugar content.
Sam Nunn is on the board of my foundation, and he's on the board
and they're doing other good things abroad for elbow and so forth. Tell us about the whole health issue, the soda tax issue, and so forth.
Obesity will kill more people in the next 100 years than smoking. And smoking will kill 1 billion people in the next 100 years if we don't do something about it. And so you want to reduce obesity. One of the ways you do it is to try to convince people not to drink any or a lot less of full sugar drinks. Why full sugar drinks? Because full sugar drinks don't have a chemical in it that tells you that you're full. So if I eat 500 calories of McDonald's fries, which are very good incidentally, yeah, I get fat, but I get fat slowly. And when I finish the fries, I'm not very hungry. If I drink 500 calories of Coke, I'm just as hungry as I was before. So it's all additive. There's also some evidence that an enormous amount of sugar is not good for you. There's some links, hasn't really proven, but there seems to be correlations between certain cancers and a lot of sugar. And in a can of Coke or Pepsi, there's enough sugar. If you took that in spoonfuls and you poured it, you dumped it into your tea, it would not dissolve. It's more than you could possibly dissolve in a cup of tea. It's an enormous amount of sugar. And there are plenty of other things that Coke and Pepsi can make that will refresh you and you can have a good time, but don't cause or don't contribute to obesity. And what I tried to do in New York was to institute something called portion control. The city regulates stores and movie theaters, something else, but not restaurants. And so we tried to pass a rule. We did pass a rule, which we thought was legal. That you couldn't get a cup bigger than 16 ounces. Now, if you want 32 ounces, you take 2 cups, nothing wrong with that. But the idea is if you have 1 cup, you probably won't go to the second one. It's a traditional, standard thing used in public health, this portion control concept. I love the soup test. They sit you down with a bowl of soup and you like the soup, and then the next day they bring you in and they sit you down with a bowl of the same soup and you start eating it. But this time they ran a tube under the table into the bottom of the soup bowl, and as fast as you drink it, they pump more soup in, and you will keep eating for hours. And so, if you had one bowl, you probably wouldn't go back for a second one, but as long as it's full, it's a bigger bowl, you eat the whole thing. Same thing is a problem incident with marijuana, where a lot of the kids are eating it in cookies, and the amount of marijuana in a standard cookie, if you ate 10% of the cookie, that's probably all your body can tolerate, except that nobody eats 10% of a cookie, eat the whole cookie. And so you go straight to the emergency room and some things. But anyways, the bottom line is the judge stopped us. I thought if we were out of office, I thought if my successor had continued, we thought the law was wrong, we probably would have won an appeal, but nobody will ever know now. And so the portion control law didn't go into effect. But having said that, around the world, because they made fun of me with a big gulp, and it was a lot of fun, everybody had a good laugh, but the public got the message, and sales of full sugar Coke and Pepsi plummeted around the world. And they found other things to do, and their earnings are still fine. Thank you very much.
So let's finish with the most topical question. And that is if someone, and you touched on this, but someone came in from Mars and they said, wait a minute now, unemployment is half of what it was 9 years ago. There's no inflation, no interest rates are low. The anchor that seems to be there that some candidates are tapping into for this presidential campaign is an income inequality. What's the basis of it, and is it being used in ways, Michael, that are really potentially divisive and destructive?
Yeah, but you said which things were good. You started out by saying what were things?
Well, unemployment is
okay, except that a lot of the jobs that have been created, a lot of unemployment is because people dropped out of the workforce. So let's not get too carried away with that number. And you said interest rates are low. Interest rates are low, but it's devastating to the retirees, just devastating. And it means also the Fed doesn't have the ability to lower interest rates if we really had a crisis. And since in this country, because of partisan Congress, we have no fiscal policy, we would be a lot better off, I've always thought, with higher interest rates. And let me tell you, no business person hires one single person or builds one single building because interest rates are at 0.25% versus 2 or 3%. It's serious. If that's the difference in the success of your project, you shouldn't be doing the project. So I'm not so sure everything is good, but I think the question you ask is, why are people upset? I can tell you that there's a handful of things. Technology is going to automate an awful lot of jobs. It's not global trade. International trade creates some jobs, takes away some jobs, on balance is good, but the people that get hurt, we have to find a program to help. So the coal miner isn't going over the renewable sector to get a job, even if there's more renewable jobs, because he or she is too old, it's the wrong part of the country, can't learn new skills or whatever. So people do get hurt with globalization, but it's basically technology that is automating, and the estimates are you could automate 40% of the jobs in the country in the next 10, 15 years. You could automate everybody that drives a cab, a bus, a trailer, a truck, and that sort of thing. So that would put a lot of people out of work. You can automate a lot of the paper pushing. Law school applications down 40% 2 years ago, not recovered at all because we've automated the research. So there's a lot of things you can do. So a lot of people think, wait a second, if I lose my job, flipping hamburgers is the best job I'm going to get. If I can get it, and I can't feed my family on 12 or 15 bucks an hour, whatever McDonald's pays, wherever you happen to be. So that's one thing that scares them. Number two, they are scared of what their kids are doing. Their kids are doing things that all their lives the parents were taught are bad things to do. They have kids out of wedlock, they marry outside the faith, they marry outside the ethnicity, they marry inside the gender, and the parents don't know how to deal with this. They don't know what to say to their kids. They've lost control. Why? Because social media has given the kids a different view of the world and an independence away from the family that you can argue isn't good because they're not learning the values that the rest of us at our age did learn and think are important. And then there is social media. They know nothing about the world. They're getting the news in 140 characters. They'll never convince me that if you read a newspaper or a magazine online, it's the same thing as reading a paper. It just isn't. Every study has shown that. This time it's different. And let me tell you, I'm 74 years old, it's been different a lot of times, and it turns out it wasn't. But there is something different here in terms of technology automating things. There is something different with the social mores changing.
Isn't it dangerous to play on these things in a divisive way?
Well, I don't know if dangerous is a subjective thing. Elected officials have always, not always, but most have said things that press the truth or prevaricate, whatever the case may be. I think the other thing that's changed is we've always depended on our news business, mostly newspapers, to tell us what's the truth and what's the implication of it. And if you think about it, the world is very different. I come back to, one is social media, the other is the economics of the news business. The news business has long ceased to be a business where they think their obligation is to inform the public and to explain to the public. There's the old joke, if it bleeds, it leads, meaning if it's not a gory story, they don't put it on the front page. Today, the economics of the news business is such that they will take a knife and create a story, and there's just too much evidence of that. Not every newspaper, but a lot of papers are doing it, and it's sensationalism, it's failure, it's scandal. That's what makes the front page. When I said to Jeb Bush, who he's a pretty conservative guy, he's good on education and good on immigration, and that's why he was on the board of my foundation until he resigned to go to work to run for president. I said, what happened? Why didn't you get it? He said, I had a great policy. I was on page 45. Trump was on the front page for criticizing the Pope. And, how can you run for office and criticize the Pope? It's on the front page. It's, the old story. It doesn't matter as long as you spell the name right. It doesn't matter what you say about him. And so we've gone for the sensational stuff, for the number of clicks and that sort of thing, because the economics of the news business are so bad, people are worried about keeping their jobs, and the radio, television, newsprint, magazines, they're worried about staying in business. And the other thing that's happening is the social media side, where we're getting all our news in short clips, and we're inundated with so much news that you can't understand anything. It sounds great. Won't it be wonderful if I can, number one, get all the news in the world? No, it's not, because you can't absorb it. And wouldn't it be wonderful if I get the news that I care about? No, it's not, because you're not going to find out about things you weren't smart enough to think. You don't know what's going to be important down the road. And so if I tell you the categories of news I want today, I'm going to miss most of what's important tomorrow, almost by definition. And so this goes on, and it's not good for finding out what's going on. You have these television stations that only reinforce what you like, whether it's liberal or conservative. CNN is all Donald Trump all the time. Fox is all Donald Trump all the time. MSNBC is all Hillary Clinton all the time. And nobody gets a balanced view. I'll give you one other thought. Plato used to stand on the forum and he'd speak. And then somebody invented paper, and he could write it out. People would make copies, and they put it on the doors of the temples or the churches as they started to go to churches. And then along came Gutenberg, and you could replicate it, so a lot of people could see it, and we started teaching the man in the street how to read. It was a unique concept, never did before, so all of a sudden they could read. And then along came, Morse with the teletype, and then Marconi with the radio, and RCA Bell Labs with television. But from Plato through television, what news was one way from the rich and powerful to the general public, and you could find out who was talking so you could validate their credibility and know whether to pay attention to them. Along comes social media, and those two things are reversed. It is now two ways, equally two ways, and you don't know who's speaking. And so you have no idea whether they say the moon's made of blue cheese. I don't know who you are. I don't know who said it, and I don't know whether it's right or wrong, and there's no ways of checking it. There's so much information. And that's really changing how you run a government, how you run a business, how you run a nonprofit, how you run a school. You know, all of a sudden, everybody's got an opinion. How do you start a job where day one there's a referendum on whether you've done a good job already? Only in an office or in your position for 24 hours, and we're demanding results. That leads to very short-term decisions and leads to elected officials worrying more about how it plays with the public, because there's a poll every day going up and down, and then the elected officials, my God, I got 10,000 emails complaining about what I said in the Senate yesterday. 10,000 emails. It was one high school kid with an Apple computer that wrote those 10,000. I mean,
So Michael,
people understand.
close with us. I mean, you've been a great success. This, with all the problems, this is the greatest country in the world. Give us a positive outlook for it. And you have a
There is a positive.
what they've accomplished.
There's a positive outlook. When people vote with their feet, where do they come? They come to America. Let's get serious. Every country has similar problems. They all have terrorism, or as you can say it's less, although 3,000 people killed in one slot, and we say there's not a lot of terrorism here. We have a big leg up on other places, but there are things that are imperfect every place in the world. Nobody's got a lock on good ideas or safety or public health or whatever. We have a fractured Congress. Yeah, we've had a fractured Congress for 245 years. What you need is somebody to pull them together, and sometimes that's easier than others. Some presidents are better at it than others. Sometimes you get lucky and you get a crisis and you get everybody to come behind you. Right after 9/11, you could have passed any
But it's
piece of
also true
legislation.
that you don't get the Bloombergs and LPs in Europe, and you get them
Yeah,
here. There's
but
something about the innovative.
I think what it is it isn't that the schools overseas aren't good, because they are, and they're getting better because of our stupid immigration policies where we train the best and the brightest from around the world and then don't let them stay here. But the difference is, it's a cultural thing. In America, some woman told me the other day, oh, her son, he started his fourth company. Isn't it wonderful? The first three didn't work, but the fourth one's going to make him a zillionaire. The failure isn't something that's bad. Now, the press tries to make it bad when it's in government, but we don't have that ethic of, if you failed, it's a disgrace. If you fail, it's sad. And hopefully you can pick yourself up, and hopefully somebody will help you so you can try again and be successful the next time, or the next time, or the next time. But in other places, I remember the first time I was ever in Europe was back in like 1968, and I listened to these two old guys talk at the table. They weren't going to do business with so-and-so. Why? So-and-so's father had gone bankrupt. It wasn't even him, it was his father. I mean, I couldn't figure out what on earth they were talking about. You got to understand that in most places in the world, lineage is what really defines people, and in America it's not.
Israel is also a place where innovation.
Yeah, because the lineage doesn't count there because it's such a new society. They haven't had a chance to build that, so they have to depend on who's the smartest, who's the most creative, who's the most convivial. But whatever it is, it's skill sets today rather than where your great-grandparents went to school. And I thought actually David Cameron, I heard him speak one time, and I've always liked the guy. I think it's very sad what's happened in the UK. It's not good for Europe, it's not good for the UK, and Cameron probably shouldn't have called the referendum. But Cameron, at a conference, addressed the issue of he came from a very plummy environment. Plummy means rarefied, old school, when went to Eton or Cambridge or Oxford, and the family can go back to the Magna Carta days and all of that. And he tried to address it. He said, yeah, I was lucky, I went to that. I'm not ashamed of it, and I want that for everybody. And the American ethic is to get it for everybody. I hope we're not changing from equal opportunity to equal results. Populism is exactly that. Populism is you want equal results, and they say by definition if the results aren't equal, then the opportunity wasn't equal. And I think non-populism, whether it's good call it capitalism or something, is not that. There you say, well, if everybody's got an equal opportunity, some people will do better than others, and then they'll be able to afford a house closer to the central city, and people that didn't do as well because they didn't work as hard, or weren't as smart, or weren't as lucky, they'll have to live further out. Not that we don't want to take care of everybody, but you have to have an allocation system of who can live where, who can get the perks and that sort of thing. And so our society is built around those that work the hardest and are the luckiest live better. And the University of California sent out a directive to their schools about 2 or 3 months ago. Do not use the phrase, America is the land of opportunity, because if somebody doesn't succeed, they might think it's their fault. But that's exactly what's happening on campuses in this country. Not all of them, but an awful lot of them.
Michael, you've given us an incredible evening of thought.